Turn the screw left. It loosens. Turn it again. It gives way. My hands are literally shaking, and honestly, it's not from fear. It is rage. Pure, unadulterated, petty, blinding rage. I am standing on my own front porch, completely humiliating myself, actively stripping my own property of a basic, harmless $100 security feature. And right there, standing exactly 1 inch past my property line so he doesn't technically count as trespassing, is Richard. Richard, the HOA president, the absolute plastic king of Boise, Idaho. He's wearing crisp, freshly ironed khaki shorts that end exactly 2 inches above the knee, a tucked-in pastel yellow polo shirt, and a pair of wraparound sunglasses that make him look like a retired cop who failed the psychological evaluation. He's holding a clipboard. Of course he's holding a clipboard. It's practically fused to his palm at this point, and plastered across his face is the most infuriating, punchable, smug grin I have ever seen in my 30-something years on this earth. He is watching me unscrew my own property, taking literal notes, basking in the glory of his bureaucratic triumph. Why am I doing this? Why am I letting a retired orthodontist with too much free time dictate what I can and cannot bolt to the siding of my own $500,000 house? Let's rewind. You see, a few months ago, I finally bought the dream. Or at least what they tell you is the dream. After years of renting cramped apartments and dealing with landlords who thought fixing a leak meant putting a bucket under it, I signed my life away on a mortgage for a beautiful 2-story, ridiculously overpriced piece of suburban utopia in Boise, Idaho. Boise is great, honestly. It's scenic, it's growing, the air smells like pine needles and expensive craft beer. My neighborhood was one of those master-planned communities where every house looks like it was generated by an AI instructed to create pleasant, middle-class aesthetic. The lawns are perfectly manicured, the sidewalks are pristine. The streetlights look like little Victorian gas lamps. It's quiet, it's peaceful. Well, it was peaceful until the great Boise porch pirate epidemic of 2026 began. It started small. You'd be scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group, aptly named the Whispering Pines Watchdogs, and you'd see a post from Carol down on Elm Street. Did anyone accidentally receive a package from Amazon? Tracking says delivered, but it's nowhere to be found. It had my specialty orthopedic insoles inside. Please let me know. We all just assumed it was a mix-up. The delivery guys are overworked, right? They drop things at the wrong door all the time. But then, 2 days later, it was Greg's house. A box containing a brand new set of noise-canceling headphones just vanished into thin air. Then it was Sarah's house. Then it was the Miller family. Suddenly, packages were disappearing faster than free samples at Costco. It didn't matter what time of day it was. The delivery truck would pull up, drop the box, snap the confirmation photo, and literally within 20 minutes, the box would be gone. It was like we had a ghost haunting our neighborhood, except instead of rattling chains, this ghost was stealing bulk packs of paper towels and air fryer accessories. The neighborhood group chat descended into absolute chaos. People were terrified. Carol, they are targeting us. They know we buy the good insoles. Greg, I'm setting up booby traps, I swear to God. I'm filling a box with angry bees, Susan. Has anyone called the police? We need a patrol car parked at the entrance 24/7. And then, it happened to me. I'm a pretty low-key guy. I don't buy a lot of flashy stuff. But I had ordered something extremely important, a custom-fitted, highly specific ergonomic mouse for editing these very videos, along with a ridiculously expensive bag of imported espresso beans. I work from home. Coffee and wrist support are the absolute lifeblood of my existence. I got the notification on my phone, delivered at 1:15 p.m. I was in the middle of a conference call, so I couldn't just jump up and grab it. I finished up my meeting, stretched, walked downstairs at 1:45 p.m., opened my front door, and nothing. Empty concrete. I blinked. I looked behind the decorative potted fern. I looked behind the little welcome mat. I literally walked down to the end of my driveway and looked in the bushes, as if the delivery driver had suddenly decided to play hide-and-seek with my espresso. Nothing. It was gone. 30 minutes. 30 minutes was all it took for some brazen, daylight-dwelling thief to saunter up to my front door, scoop up my lifeline, and walk away. I was livid. You know that hot, prickly feeling you get in the back of your neck when you realize you've been violated? When you realize someone just casually stepped onto the property you pay a massive mortgage on and took what belonged to you. It's infuriating. It's not even about the monetary value of the items. Though, let's be real, that coffee was $25 a bag, It's about the absolute sheer audacity. So, I did what any rational modern homeowner does. I didn't build a moat. I didn't buy a guard dog. I got in my car, drove straight to the nearest electronics store, and bought a standard, top-rated, $100 Wi-Fi video doorbell camera. It was a sleek little black rectangle. High-definition 1080p video, night vision, two-way audio, and motion tracking. Simple, elegant, effective. I drove home completely hyped up on the prospect of defending my castle. I got out my trusty drill, spent maybe 15 minutes connecting the two little wires, and screwed the mounting bracket directly into the wood trim, right next to my front door. I clicked the camera into place. The little blue ring lit up. It chirped at me. I pulled out my phone, connected the app, and boom! There was my front porch in glorious high-definition color. I could see the street. I could see the driveway. I could see my potted fern. If anyone so much as sneezed on my walkway, my phone would ping, and I'd have their face in crisp 1080p resolution. I felt like a genius. I felt secure. I felt like I had finally taken control of my domain. I went to sleep that night resting easy, knowing that my front door was guarded by the unblinking digital eye of modern technology. Simple, right? Wrong. So incredibly violently wrong, because I had completely forgotten about the true menace lurking in the suburbs. The porch pirates were a nuisance, sure, but they were amateurs compared to the organized, tyrannical, bureaucratic syndicate known as the Homeowners Association Board of Directors. Enter Richard. It was exactly 48 hours after I installed the camera. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen, sipping a cup of vastly inferior, store-bought coffee when a sharp, authoritative rap echoed through the house. Knock, knock, knock. Not a friendly hey neighbor tap. This was the knock of a man sentenced to speak to the manager. I walked to the door, wiping sleep from my eyes. I didn't even bother checking the camera feed. I just opened the door, and there he was, the plastic king of Boise himself. Richard was standing on my welcome mat, his feet planted shoulder-width apart in a power stance. He had his clipboard pressed against his chest. He wasn't alone either. Standing slightly behind him, looking nervously at the ground, was Margaret, the HOA secretary, who basically just followed Richard around taking notes and validating his ego. "Good morning, Richard," I said, leaning against the doorframe, trying to keep my tone light. "What can I do for you?" Richard didn't say good morning. He didn't even make small talk. He just slowly raised a single, stubby index finger and pointed directly at the little black rectangle mounted next to my door. "What is that?" Richard demanded. His voice was nasally, the kind of voice that automatically makes you want to disagree with whatever it's saying. "That?" I looked at it, then back at him. "It's a doorbell camera. You know, because of all the thefts happening in the neighborhood, I got my coffee stolen on Tuesday." Richard's expression did not change. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't care about my coffee. He unclipped a piece of paper from his board and held it up to my face like he was presenting a warrant. "You are in direct violation of the Whispering Pines Community Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions," he declared, enunciating every single syllable as if he were a Supreme Court justice delivering a landmark ruling. I literally laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. "Richard, it's a doorbell. It's 2 inches wide." "It is an unapproved electronic surveillance device," Richard countered, his voice rising an octave. He cleared his throat and began to read aloud, projecting his voice so the entire street could hear. Bylaw 4B, Section 2. No electronic surveillance devices, closed-circuit cameras, or recording equipment of any kind shall be physically affixed to the exterior structure, facade, or landscaping of any property within the Whispering Pines community, without prior written authorization from the Architectural Review Committee. He snapped the paper down. "You did not submit an ARC form. You did not get approval." "Richard, are you serious right now?" I asked, completely baffled. "Half the neighborhood is getting robbed blind. Greg down the street lost an entire set of Bose headphones. Carol's orthotics are gone. I installed this to protect my property. It's practically invisible." "Rules are rules," Richard said, flashing that smug, self-satisfied grin. It was the grin of a man who had absolutely zero power in his real life, so he hoarded every tiny ounce of authority he could find in his retirement. "If we allow you to bolt a camera to your house, next thing you know, people will be putting up satellite dishes. They'll be putting up barbed wire. It destroys the aesthetic uniformity of the community. It's replacing the standard doorbell button," I argued, my voice starting to heat up. "It's literally the exact same size as the thing the builder put there. It just has a lens in it. Did you submit an ARC form? He asked, leaning forward, challenging me. No, because it's a doorbell. Then it is an illegal modification, Richard interrupted, practically vibrating with glee. He pulled a pen from his shirt pocket, clicked it with an aggressive snap, and began furiously scribbling on his clipboard. I am issuing you a citation. A citation? Yes, Richard said, tearing the pink carbon copy from the pad and thrusting it into my hand. A fine of $500 for the unauthorized architectural modification, and a formal notice of non-compliance. You have exactly 24 hours to remove the device and restore the exterior structure to its original condition. If it is not removed by 10:00 a.m. tomorrow, the fine will double to $1,000, and we will place a lien on your property. I stared at the pink slip of paper in my hand. $500. $500. For a camera that cost me $100 to catch a thief who stole $25 worth of coffee. The math was so incredibly stupid it actually made my brain hurt. You're going to put a lien on my house over a doorbell, I said, my voice dropping to a deadpan whisper. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them, Richard said, puffing out his chest. Tomorrow morning, 10:00 a.m. I will be here to verify the removal. Have a pleasant day. He turned on his heel, his khaki shorts swishing, and marched back down my walkway, Margaret scurrying closely behind him like a frightened quail. I stood in the doorway for a long, silent minute. The street was quiet again. The birds were singing. The little Victorian street lamps stood proudly in the sun. It was a perfect, beautiful suburban morning, and I was absolutely seething. I looked at the camera. It looked back at me, its little blue light blinking happily. It had recorded the entire interaction. I had Richard on crystal-clear 1080p video, illegally threatening to steal my house over a piece of plastic. Now a normal person might just accept defeat. A normal person would say, you know what? It's not worth the hassle. I'll just take it down and maybe install one looking out the window from the inside. A normal person would pay the ridiculous fine to avoid making an enemy of the HOA president. But if you've watched this channel for more than 5 minutes, you know damn well I am not a normal person. I am a petty, stubborn, highly detail-oriented man who thrives on legal revenge. I didn't scream, I didn't yell after him, I didn't get mad. I closed the door, I locked the deadbolt, and I went straight to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. I didn't get mad, I got caffeinated, because when someone hits you with the rulebook, you don't fight them with emotion. You fight them with their own ridiculous, poorly drafted, loophole-ridden rules. I walked into my home office, booted up my computer, and logged into the incredibly clunky, early 2000s-era website that the Whispering Pines HOA used to host their documents. I found the master file, the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. It was a massive 150-page PDF document that looked like it was written by a lawyer who was paid by the word and actively hated human joy. I downloaded it, I opened it, I hit Control-F, I searched for Bylaw 4B. There it was, nestled between a rule strictly regulating the exact shade of beige allowed for window trim and a bizarrely specific ban on inflatable lawn flamingos. I read the text on the screen. I read it once. I read it twice. I read it out loud to the empty room, letting the words roll over my tongue. Bylaw 4B, Section 2. No electronic surveillance devices, closed-circuit cameras, or recording equipment of any kind shall be physically affixed to the exterior structure, facade, or landscaping of any property within the Whispering Pines community, without prior written authorization from the Architectural Review Committee. I leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair. I took a sip of my terrible store-bought coffee. A slow, wicked, Grinch-like smile started to spread across my face. Have you ever had one of those moments where the universe just hands you the perfect weapon? Where your enemy makes a mistake so glaring, so fundamentally flawed, that you almost feel bad for them? Almost. I stared at the words on the screen. I highlighted them with my cursor. Physically affixed to the exterior structure, facade, or landscaping. I read it again. Physically affixed. That was it. That was the whole rule. That was the absolute limit of Richard's power. His precious little rule book, the holy text by which he governed his pathetic suburban fiefdom, was incredibly specific. It controlled the structure. It controlled the siding. It controlled the bricks, the wood trim, the roof shingles, and the dirt in the flower beds. It gave him absolute, unquestioned dominion over the physical elements of my house. But it said absolutely nothing about the air. It said nothing about the sky. The HOA controls the ground. They do not control the navigable airspace above it. I looked out my office window, up at the clear, blue Idaho sky stretching out over my driveway. I realized, right then and there, that Richard had fundamentally misunderstood the battleground. He thought we were fighting a ground war over a piece of door trim. He had no idea I was about to take this fight to the absolute stratosphere. I grabbed my phone. I didn't open the HOA app. I didn't call Richard to beg for an extension. I opened Google. I started searching for FAA regulations. I started searching for the legal definition of navigable airspace. I started looking up the doctrine of federal preemption. Because if Richard wanted to use a poorly written local bylaw to force me to take down my camera, I was going to use the full, crushing, undeniable weight of the United States federal government to put one right back up. And it was going to be so much louder, so much bigger, and so much more obnoxious than a tiny little doorbell camera. I pulled out a notepad and a pen. I started making a list. Step 1. Comply with Richard's demand. Take down the doorbell camera. Let him think he won. Let him get that smug little hit of dopamine. Step 2. Find a commercial drone pilot. Step 3. Ruin Richard's absolute life. I looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. I had exactly 23 hours to execute the most maliciously compliant, legally bulletproof trap in the history of Whispering Pines. I picked up my screwdriver. It was time to go back outside and unscrew that camera. Not in defeat, but in preparation. The board was set, the pieces were moving, and the plastic king of Boise was about to learn a very hard, very expensive lesson about the limits of his jurisdiction. Because while Richard ruled the landscaping, the skies belonged to me. So there I was, sitting in my home office with the door locked, staring at my dual monitors, armed with a fresh cup of slightly better coffee, and a terrifying amount of petty determination. Honestly, guys, there are few things more dangerous in this world than a guy with a fast internet connection, a vendetta, and a background in digging through tedious documentation. I practically live in Google Sheets and ClickUp for my day job, managing massive, headache-inducing projects, organizing data, finding efficiencies, and spotting the tiny glaring errors that other people miss. That is my bread and butter. Richard the orthodontist didn't know it, but he had just challenged me to a game of bureaucratic chess, and he was playing with checkers he bought at a garage sale. I had 23 hours until his little 10 a.m. deadline. 23 hours until the $500 fine doubled and the threat of a property lien became a reality. I needed a solution that completely bypassed Bylaw 4B, Section 2. Let's look at the exact wording one more time. The rule explicitly banned 10 surveillance devices that were physically affixed to the exterior structure, facade, or landscaping. If I put a camera on a tripod in my driveway, it's touching the landscaping, affixed. If I suction cup it to the outside of my window, affixed to the facade. If I glue it to my mailbox, affixed to the exterior structure. Richard and his cronies had basically built an invisible, impenetrable dome over my property, extending from the dirt to the roof shingles. But like I said earlier, they forgot to claim the sky. I opened up a new browser window and bypassed the state laws, diving straight into the heavy, intimidating, federally mandated waters of the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, listen closely, because this is where the legal magic happens. If you take away anything from this video, let it be this golden concept, federal preemption. In the United States legal system, there's a hierarchy. You have your local neighborhood rules, like an HOA. Above that, you have city ordinances. Above that, state laws. And sitting at the very top of the mountain, wielding the absolute hammer of the gods, is federal law, the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution essentially says that when a federal law and a local rule conflict, the federal law wins. It preempts the local rule. It crushes it into dust. So what does this have to do with my stolen espresso beans? Everything. Because according to the FAA, under 14 CFR Part 107, a drone is not a toy. It is not a gadget. A drone is legally classified as an aircraft. Let that sink in. The FAA regulates the national airspace system. From the moment a drone lifts off the ground, it enters navigable airspace, which is strictly and exclusively under the jurisdiction of the Federal Aviation Administration. Can a local HOA regulate the flight path of a Boeing 737? No. Can Richard the HOA president tell a police helicopter it's not allowed to hover over his perfectly manicured lawn? Absolutely not. And crucially, can a homeowners association pass a bylaw that enforces a no-fly zone or regulates a federally registered aircraft operating in the sky above a private driveway? Ding, ding, ding! We have a winner! No, they literally cannot. The FAA has issued multiple memorandums explicitly stating that state and local governments, and by extension, petty little HOAs, cannot enact laws that regulate aviation safety or airspace restriction. If a drone pilot is licensed flying legally and maintaining line of sight, the HOA has absolutely zero authority to order that aircraft out of the sky. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers like a cartoon villain. I didn't need to affix a camera to my house. I just needed to park an aircraft in the sky above it. The loophole was wide open. Now, I just needed an aerial architect to help me fly right through it. I hit Google again, searching for commercial drone operators, Boise, Idaho. A few real estate photography companies popped up, a guy who did wedding videography, and then, nestled halfway down the page, I found it. Sky High Solutions, Industrial Inspections, Aerial Surveying, and Custom Drone Deployments. Part 107 FAA certified. I clicked the number. It rang 3 times before a guy picked up. Sky High Solutions, this is Mike, a voice said. He sounded relaxed, and I could faintly hear the wet, rhythmic smacking of chewing gum over the receiver. Hey, Mike, I said. My name is James. I have a bit of an unconventional job request. And honestly, I need to know if you're the kind of guy who appreciates malicious compliance. The chewing stopped. I'm listening. I need a drone, I said. And I need it to hover directly over my driveway, pointing at my front door, in 4K resolution. Okay, Mike said slowly. We do property security surveys all the time. How many hours a day do you need it up? 24? I replied deadpan. 7 days a week, indefinitely. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The chewing resumed, slightly slower this time. Buddy, you know drones have batteries, right? A standard commercial rig gets maybe 40 minutes of flight time before it has to come down for a swap. You'd be paying me to stand in your yard swapping batteries every half hour for the rest of my life. The labor cost alone would bankrupt you. That's why I'm calling a professional, I countered. Isn't there a way to supply continuous power, like a cable? A tethered drone system, Mike said, a hint of respect creeping into his voice. Yeah, we use them for search and rescue operations, or crowd monitoring at big festivals. It's a drone attached to a microfilament power cable that runs down to a ground station generator. It can stay airborne basically forever, as long as the ground station has juice. But dude, why? Why do you need an industrial tethered drone hovering over a residential driveway in Boise? I took a deep breath. Because, Mike, my HOA president just fined me $500 for screwing a doorbell camera to my house, citing a bylaw that bans devices physically affixed to the exterior structure or landscaping. So, I am going to comply. I am going to remove the affixed device. And then I am going to replace it with a federally registered aircraft operating in navigable airspace. The line went dead silent. For a second I thought he had hung up. Then, Mike started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and escalated into a full-blown, wheezing belly laugh. Oh my God, Mike gasped. You're fighting the HOA with the FAA? That is the most beautifully unhinged thing I have heard all year. Where do you live? Whispering Pines. Oh, I know those guys. They tried to fine my company last year when we were shooting aerials for a real estate listing. They said our drone was disrupting the community aesthetic. I told them to pound sand. Mike paused. Look, man, I usually charge a massive premium for a 24/7 tethered deployment. It's high wear on the motors. But for this? For the chance to flex Part 107 on an HOA president? I'll cut you a deal. When do we start? Richard is coming to inspect my property tomorrow at 10:00 a.m., I said, a grin stretching across my face. Can you be here by 8 a.m.? I'll be there at 7:30. Have the coffee ready. The next morning, at exactly 7:25 a.m., a massive matte black Mercedes Sprinter van rolled down my quiet, perfectly manicured street. It looked like a SWAT vehicle mixed with a mobile command center. It backed into my driveway with a heavy, industrial rumble that I knew was already making my neighbors twitch their curtains. The driver's door popped open, and Mike stepped out. Mike was exactly what you would expect a renegade drone pilot to look like. He was in his late 20s, wearing faded cargo pants, a black t-shirt that said, "I'm not flying, I'm aviating," and a pair of aviator sunglasses. He was aggressively chewing a piece of spearmint gum and holding a heavy-duty Pelican case. "Morning, boss," Mike said, slapping the hood of his van. "Beautiful day for a little federal aviation, wouldn't you say?" "A glorious day, Mike," I said, handing him a mug of coffee. I had already unscrewed the doorbell camera. The wood trim next to my door was completely bare. I was 100% in compliance with Bylaw 4B, Section 2. All right, let's hash out the operational logistics, Mike said, kicking into professional mode. He opened the back doors of the van, revealing a dizzying array of monitors, charging banks, and heavy-duty equipment. We moved into my garage, and I pulled up my laptop, opening a fresh Google Sheet. Let's look at the numbers and the legal shielding, I said. I need this to be bulletproof. If I'm going to drop money on this, it needs to be legally and financially documented. Smart, Mike said, leaning over my shoulder. Okay, here's the breakdown. We are deploying a DJI Matrice 300 RTK. It's an enterprise-grade drone, absolute beast. It's equipped with a Zenmuse H20 camera payload, which gives us 20-megapixel optical zoom, wide-angle 4K video, and a laser rangefinder. Overkill, I whispered, loving every second of it. Way overkill, Mike agreed. Now for the tether. We're using a Volarius V-line tether system. It replaces the drone's standard battery with a smart power module. A Kevlar-reinforced micro-tether runs from the drone down to this. He hauled a heavy metallic box out of the van and set it on the floor of my garage. It looked like a high-tech suitcase. This is the ground station, Mike explained. It plugs directly into your standard 110-volt wall outlet here in the garage. It converts the AC power to high-voltage DC, sends it up the tether, and powers the drone continuously. As long as you pay your electric bill, this baby stays in the sky. I started typing the specs into my spreadsheet, okay? And what about the legal boundaries? This is the fun part, Mike said, pulling a manila folder from his van. Here is my commercial Part 107 FAA pilot's license. Here is the federal registration certificate for the Matrice 300. As the pilot in command, PIC, I am designating your driveway as my active launch, recovery, and operational zone. Wait, but you won't be here 24/7, I pointed out. Doesn't the FAA require the pilot to be present? Normally, yes, Mike grinned. But under a tethered deployment waiver, and because the aircraft remains strictly within a confined operational volume over private property, without traversing open airspace, we can classify it as an automated, secured, tethered observation post. I maintain remote monitoring access from my office. If anything goes wrong, the ground station automatically reels the drone in and lands it safely. It's completely above board. And the camera? The camera will be locked. Fixed pitch, fixed yaw, Mike said, drawing an imaginary box in the air. It will only record your front porch, your walkway, and your driveway. We are not pointing it at the street. We are not pointing it at the neighbor's windows. We are strictly monitoring your private property to avoid any civil invasion of privacy claims. Richard can't say we're spying on him. We are only spying on whoever steps foot on your concrete. Perfect, I said. And the cost? Normally, a continuous tethered deployment runs about $1,200 a day for industrial clients, Mike said, pulling out a specialized contract. But I'm classifying this as an extended security beta test. I'm billing you a flat rate of $2,500 for a one-week deployment, setup, teardown, and 24/7 remote monitoring included. I looked at the number. $2,500. It was 5 times the cost of the initial HOA fine. But you know what? The fine was about submission. This invoice was an investment in pure, unadulterated psychological warfare. I hit approve on my spreadsheet, took the pen Mike offered, and signed the contract on the hood of his van. Let's light this candle, I said. The setup was a thing of chaotic beauty. Mike ran a heavy-duty extension cord from my garage wall outlet to the Volarius ground station positioned just inside my open garage door. From the ground station, the ultra-thin, incredibly strong Kevlar tether stretched out into the driveway. Mike pulled the DJI Matrice 300 out of its case. It was massive. This wasn't a cute little plastic toy you buy at Best Buy to take videos of your kids at the park. This was a heavy carbon fiber industrial machine. Its rotor arms clicked into place with a satisfying metallic snap. It looked like a robotic insect designed for war. He placed it directly in the center of my driveway. All right, clearing the airspace, Mike yelled, putting on a high-visibility vest that practically screamed federal authority. He tapped a few commands into his massive remote control console, which looked more like a military tactical pad than a drone controller. System checks green, Mike announced. Power output stable. GPS lock acquired. Commencing takeoff in 3, 2, 1. He pushed the thumbsticks forward. The 4 massive rotors spun to life. It didn't sound like a toy. It sounded like an industrial vacuum cleaner crossed with a weed whacker. A deep, resonant whir echoed off the pristine suburban houses. The sheer downdraft kicked up a cloud of dust and blew a stray piece of newspaper halfway. down the street. Slowly, majestically, the drone lifted off the concrete. The Kevlar tether spooled out flawlessly from the ground station, keeping perfectly taut as the drone ascended, 10 feet, 20 feet. Holding it 30 feet above ground level, Mike called out over the noise of the rotors. I stood in my driveway looking up. It was glorious. 30 feet in the air, hanging perfectly stationary in the crisp Idaho morning sky, was a massive black humming piece of federal aviation. It had blinking green and red navigation lights on its arms that flashed brightly, even in the daylight, and slung underneath it, the massive Zenmuse H20 camera module was angled down, staring unblinkingly at my now bare front door trim. It wasn't physically affixed to the exterior structure. It wasn't physically affixed to the landscaping. It was hovering in the free, untamed, federally regulated navigable airspace of the United States of America. "Camera feed is live," Mike said, holding up his control pad. He tapped the screen, and there it was. Crystal clear, 4K resolution footage of my front porch, completely unobstructed, streaming directly to my phone and Mike's remote servers simultaneously. "Mike!" I yelled over the hum of the propellers. "It's beautiful." "It's loud is what it is," Mike yelled back, laughing. "You sure you want to leave this thing running?" "It sounds like victory," I replied. I checked my watch. It was 9:45 a.m. I walked over to the edge of my driveway, leaned against my mailbox, and looked down the street. The stage was set. The trap was sprung. The federal loophole was securely anchored 30 feet above my head. All I had to do now was wait for the plastic king of Boise to arrive for his inspection. It is exactly 9:50 a.m. The Idaho sun is shining. The sprinklers are doing their little rhythmic cheech-cheech dance across the perfectly manicured Kentucky bluegrass, and hovering exactly 30 feet above my concrete driveway is a piece of machinery that looks like it belongs in a military strike package, not a suburban cul-de-sac. The DJI Matrice 300 RTK isn't just flying, it is loitering. It is holding its GPS coordinates with terrifying, absolute precision. The 4 massive carbon fiber rotors are chopping through the crisp morning air, producing a sound that I can only describe as an angry swarm of robotic bees trapped inside a metal wind tunnel. It is loud, it is obnoxious, it is undeniably, gloriously majestic. The thick, Kevlar-reinforced tether line drops down from its underbelly like a mechanical umbilical cord, plugging directly into the heavy black ground station humming away inside my open garage. And slung beneath the aircraft, tracking perfectly level with the horizon, is the Zenmuse H20 payload. The multi-sensor camera module looks like the unblinking eye of a cyborg, its 4K lens pointed squarely, unapologetically, at the completely empty spot on my doorframe where my tiny $100 doorbell used to be. I am sitting on the edge of a plastic lawn chair I dragged out to the driveway. I have a fresh mug of coffee in my hand. I am literally vibrating with anticipation. I feel like a kid on Christmas morning, except instead of waiting for Santa, I'm waiting for a 62-year-old retired orthodontist to experience a complete psychological collapse. At 9:56 a.m., right on schedule, he arrives. Enter Richard. Let's talk about Richard's morning power walk routine for a second, because it is a spectacle all on its own. He doesn't just walk, he marches. He pumps his arms at sharp 90-degree angles, his little fists clenched tightly, elbows swinging like pistons. He's wearing a fresh pair of blindingly white New Balance sneakers, the official footwear of men who write furious letters to the city council about pothole dimensions. He has his trusty wooden clipboard tucked tightly under his left arm. Margaret, the ever-loyal HOA secretary, is trailing a few paces behind him, practically jogging in her pastel tracksuit to keep up with his aggressive, bureaucratic stride. Richard rounds the corner of Elm Street and turns onto my block. From a distance, he can't quite see the drone yet because of the mature, HOA-mandated oak trees lining the sidewalk. But he can hear it. Oh, he can definitely hear it. I watch him pause. He tilts his head, squinting behind his wraparound sunglasses. He looks like a confused golden retriever trying to locate a high-pitched whistle. He probably thinks it's a rogue leaf blower. He probably thinks someone is illegally pressure washing their driveway on a weekend. He has absolutely no idea what is waiting for him. He resumes his march, his face set in a mask of grim determination. He reaches the property line separating my house from the Miller family next door. He stops. He plants his hands on his hips. He looks directly at my front door. From his vantage point on the sidewalk, he can clearly see the bare wood trim. He sees that the offending doorbell camera is gone. A massive, victorious, utterly smug grin spreads across his face. He literally puffs out his chest. He thinks he is one. He thinks the plastic king of Boise has successfully defended his aesthetic realm against the rogue element of home security. And then the downdraft hits him, a sudden gust of wind, propelled by the massive rotors of the Matrice 300, hovering just out of his direct eye line, sweeps across the lawn and violently rustles the leaves of his precious HOA-approved ornamental bushes. Richard looks down at the aggressively shaking bushes. He looks back at me, sitting in my lawn chair with a grin that could rival the Cheshire Cat. And then, slowly, inexorably, his gaze travels upward, up the black Kevlar tether, up into the clear blue Idaho sky. The visual comedy of this moment cannot be overstated. It belongs in the Louvre. Richard's brain physically stops functioning. You can almost see the little spinning loading wheel behind his eyes as he tries to process the visual data. Error, bypass protocol, bylaw not found. He is looking at an enterprise-grade industrial drone hovering directly over a residential driveway. His jaw literally drops. His mouth hangs open in a perfect cartoonish O. The smug grin melts off his face, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated, existential shock. His left arm goes completely slack. The wooden clipboard slips from his grip. It hits the concrete sidewalk with a sharp, echoing clack. The carbon copy violation forms fluttering slightly in the drone's downdraft. Margaret gasps, clutching her collar, staring at the sky like the mothership from Independence Day just breached the clouds over Boise. Richard snaps out of his trance. The shock is instantly replaced by a deep, terrifying shade of crimson that creeps up his neck and blotches his face. He kicks his clipboard out of the way, stomps across the grass, violating his own strict rule about walking on private lawns, and marches straight up to the edge of my driveway. He is vibrating with rage. He has to raise his voice to a near shout just to be heard over the angry robotic bees. "What is that monstrosity?" Richard screams, pointing a trembling finger at the sky. "Take it down. It's a camera." I take a slow, deliberately obnoxious sip of my coffee. I lean forward in my lawn chair. "It's an aircraft, Richard," I say, projecting my voice calmly over the whir of the rotors. "And it's not affixed to the structure." Richard's face twitches. He looks at the blank spot on my doorframe. He looks back at the drone. He realizes in real time exactly what I have done. I followed his order to the letter, and in doing so, I bypassed his entire regime. "You are violating the noise ordinance," Richard yells, desperately pivoting to a new legal strategy. "That thing sounds like a jet engine. Turn it off immediately." "Actually, Richard, the city noise ordinance doesn't take effect until 10 p.m. for sustained decibel levels," I reply casually, checking my watch. "And besides, it's hovering at 65 decibels from the property line. That's exactly the same volume as the commercial leaf blowers. The HOA landscaping crew runs every Tuesday at 7 a.m. If this is a violation, I expect you to fine the landscapers too. It's an invasion of privacy." Margaret chimes in from the sidewalk, wringing her hands. "It's looking right into our windows." "Margaret, I promise you, nobody wants to look into your windows," I say, perhaps a little too snarky. But honestly, I am running on pure adrenaline. The payload camera is locked on a fixed pitch and yaw. It is staring exclusively at my welcome mat. It physically cannot pan up to the street without me authorizing it through the flight logs. "I don't care what it's looking at," Richard roars, stepping 1 inch over my property line. "It is an unauthorized surveillance device in my neighborhood. You did not submit an ARC form. Take it out of the sky this instant, or there will be severe consequences." "Richard, as much as you like to think you own the sky over Whispering Pines, you don't," I say, standing up. I pull the manila folder Mike gave me off the table next to my chair. "This is a federally registered aircraft operating in navigable airspace under FAA 14 CFR Part 107. You literally do not have the legal authority to ground it. Only the Federal Aviation Administration can do that." Richard is breathing heavily now. His pastel polo shirt is actually visibly sweating. He is backed into a bureaucratic corner, completely stripped of his power, and he hates it. He points a finger squarely at my chest. "I'm fining you $1,000, Richard bellows, his voice cracking slightly at the end. I smile. It is a cold, calculating, victorious smile. "Send the bill to the FAA. The silence that follows is deafening, even over the sound of the drone. Richard stares at me, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. He has no script for this. His rulebook is useless. The clipboard is on the ground. And that is when we both realize we are no longer alone. The commotion, the loud, persistent hum of the drone and Richard's screaming, has not gone unnoticed. It's Saturday morning in the suburbs. People are home, and suburbanites absolutely live for neighborhood drama. Front doors are cracking open up and down Elm Street. People are stepping out onto their porches in their bathrobes, holding coffee mugs, squinting up at the sky. The drone has become a beacon. It's a giant, noisy, flashing middle finger to the HOA, and the entire neighborhood is coming out to witness the spectacle. I look around at my audience. Some of them look annoyed at the noise, sure, but as they piece together what is happening, as they see Richard the Dictator standing powerless in my driveway while a high-tech aircraft guards my porch, the mood shifts. The neighborhood reaction is frankly the greatest thing I have ever witnessed. Here is a definitive list of the absolute best reactions from the Whispering Pines residents that morning. 1. Greg the Anarchist. Greg, the guy who had his expensive Bose headphones stolen, wanders over from 3 houses down. He's wearing flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looks up at the Matrice 300, looks at Richard's red face, and then looks at me. He doesn't say a word. He just slowly raises his right hand, gives me a crisp, solemn military salute, and walks back home. Absolute legend. 2. Carol's pure confusion. Carol, the woman missing her orthopedic insoles, is standing on the sidewalk next to Margaret. She is staring at the drone with her mouth hanging open. "Is that the Google Maps car?" she asks loudly. "Are they updating the street view? Why is it in the sky? Should I wave?" 3. The TikTok teenager. The Miller family's 16-year-old son comes sprinting out of his house barefoot, holding his iPhone horizontally. He completely ignores Richard, runs right up to the edge of the driveway, and starts filming the drone, providing live commentary. "Bro, my neighbor literally summoned a kill streak because the HOA got mad at his Ring camera. Look at this absolute unit. HOA president is molding right now. Chat, is this real?" 4. The terrified FedEx driver. A FedEx delivery truck turns onto the street. The driver slows to a crawl as he approaches my house. He sees the massive drone hovering ominously over the driveway. He sees Richard screaming. He sees the crowd. The driver stops the truck, slowly rolls up his window, locks the doors, and slowly reverses all the way back to the intersection, completely abandoning his route for our street. My porch is officially the most secure location in the state of Idaho. 5. The Whispering Pines Watchdogs group chat explosion. My phone, sitting on the table next to me, starts buzzing uncontrollably. The neighborhood Facebook group is melting down in real time. People 2 streets over who can hear the hum are posting blurry photos out their bathroom windows, asking if there is a police standoff. Susan has already posted 3 times demanding to know if the drone is emitting 5G radiation. Richard looks around at the growing crowd. He realizes he has completely lost control of the narrative. He isn't the stern enforcer of community standards right now. He is the punchline to a massive, expensive, federally protected joke. He bends down and furiously snatches his clipboard off the concrete. He doesn't bother dusting it off. "This isn't over," Richard hisses, pointing his pen at me like a weapon. "I am calling an emergency board meeting. I am calling the police. You are going to be in handcuffs by noon." I look forward to discussing the jurisdictional limits of local law enforcement regarding federal airspace with the responding officers. I reply, pulling out my phone and settling back into my lawn chair. "Have a great walk, Richard." Richard turns on his heel. He doesn't march this time. He retreats. He power walks away as fast as his khaki-clad legs can carry him, muttering furiously to Margaret, who is practically sprinting to keep up. I watch them disappear around the corner. I look back up at the DJI Matrice 300 RTK. It just sits there, humming happily, completely unbothered by the suburban chaos unfolding beneath it. The little green and red navigation lights blink steadily. The trap is fully sprung. The first battle is won. But as Richard's threat echoes in my mind, I know the real fight is just beginning. He is going to call the cops. He is going to try and use the city to fight a federal battle. I take a deep breath, savoring the smell of pine needles, expensive espresso, an absolute undeniable victory. I pull out my phone and text Mike, the drone pilot. Phase 1 complete. The Eagle is airborne, and the target is incredibly mad. Stand by for police arrival. Mike replies 3 seconds later with a single emoji. The sunglasses smiley face. It is going to be a beautiful weekend. It's May 2026, roughly 45 minutes after Richard executed his furious, khaki-clad retreat. The Boise morning has warmed up nicely. My coffee is gone, replaced by an ice-cold sparkling water. I am still sitting in my driveway lawn chair, basking in the majestic 65-decibel hum of the DJI Matrice 300 RTK hovering 30 feet above my head. It's peaceful in its own chaotic, industrial way. Then, the peace is broken by the unmistakable sound of a heavy American V8 engine rolling down Elm Street. Not one, but two Boise Police Department Ford Explorer Interceptors turn the corner, creeping along the speed bump-riddled asphalt of Whispering Pines. The light bars aren't flashing, which means this isn't a Code 3 emergency. But the fact that they dispatched 2 units tells me exactly how unhinged Richard must have sounded on the 911 call. I can just imagine the dispatch logs. We have a frantic mail caller refuses to give age, demanding a SWAT response for a flying UFO harassing a residential neighborhood and violating architectural bylaws. The cruisers pull up in front of my house, parking at sharp, defensive angles against the curb. The doors pop open. Out step 2 officers. Let me paint the picture of these guys. Officer number 1 is a seasoned veteran. He has a little bit of gray at his temples, a completely unbothered expression, and the thick, sturdy build of a man who has eaten his fair share of break room donuts and broken up too many. Domestic disputes over misplaced lawnmowers. We'll call him Officer Miller. Officer number 2 is younger, early 20s, looks fresh out of the academy, and is staring at the sky with an expression that perfectly mirrors Carol's from earlier. Pure, unadulterated confusion. We'll call him Rookie. Before the officers can even close their car doors, the bushes on the property line rustle violently. Richard emerges like a bureaucratic ninja who tripped over a garden hose. He has literally been hiding in the neighbor's azaleas, waiting for the cops to arrive. "Officers, finally!" Richard shouts, jogging over to them. He is still clutching the wooden clipboard like a shield. "I am Richard, the president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I am the one who called. You need to arrest this man immediately and impound that machine." Officer Miller slowly closes his door. He rests his thumbs on his duty belt, adjusting the weight. He looks at Richard. He looks at me, casually sipping my sparkling water. Then, he looks up at the 30-foot Kevlar tether and the massive, black humming aircraft hovering in the pristine Idaho sky. Officer Miller takes a long, slow breath. He looks back at the rookie. The rookie just shrugs, his eyes wide. "Okay," Officer Miller says, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that carries perfectly over the drone's noise. "Let's everyone take a breath, Mr. Richard, was it? You called dispatch saying there was a disturbance and an invasion of privacy in progress. It's a massive surveillance drone." Richard shrieks, pointing his pen at the sky. He is flying it directly over the neighborhood. He's spying on us. He's violating the community covenants. He's violating my visual aesthetic, and he's committing a cybercrime. I want him in handcuffs. I want the drone shot down if you have to. "We're not shooting anything down, sir." Officer Miller sighs, already radiating the tired energy of a man dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. Miller walks up my driveway, stopping about 10 feet from my lawn chair. The rookie follows closely, keeping a wary eye on the drone, clearly wondering if it's going to drop a net on him. "Morning, officers," I say cheerfully, remaining seated. I give a little 2-finger wave. "Morning," Miller says. "Care to explain why you've got a commercial-grade aircraft tethered to your garage?" "Absolutely, officer," I say, finally standing up. "It's a security measure. We've had a massive string of package thefts in the neighborhood lately. I actually had a package stolen right off this porch just a few days ago. I tried to install a standard $100 Ring doorbell camera, but Richard here," I gesture to the seething HOA president, "informed me that screwing a doorbell to my own house violated an HOA bylaw about affixing devices to the exterior structure. He fined me $500 and threatened to put a lien on my house." The rookie's eyebrows shoot up into his hairline. "A lien? Over a doorbell? $500 and a lien," I confirm, nodding solemnly. So, wanting to be a perfectly compliant resident, I remove the offending doorbell. But since I still need security, and the HOA rules only govern the physical structures and landscaping, I hired a commercial, FAA-licensed drone company to establish an active, federally compliant, tethered observation post in the navigable airspace above my driveway. Officer Miller stares at me. A very slow, very subtle twitch starts at the corner of his mouth. It is the twitch of a police officer who desperately wants to laugh, but is professionally obligated not to. "That's a lie," Richard interrupts, stomping his foot. He literally stomps his foot. "It's not an observation post, it's a nuisance. It's a noise violation. It's trespassing on the community's air." Community's air, Officer Miller repeats, turning his head slowly to look at Richard. Sir, the HOA does not own the air. We own the aesthetic environment. Richard counters, his voice cracking. He didn't submit an ARC form. You need to enforce the bylaws, Sir Miller says, his tone shifting from patient to slightly annoyed. The Boise Police Department does not enforce homeowners association bylaws. We enforce city, state, and federal laws. Your architectural forms are a civil matter. If you have a problem with his unapproved paint colors or his cameras, you take him to civil court. It's an invasion of privacy. Richard pivots frantically, clutching at legal straws. That camera is pointing right into our houses. That is a crime. That is voyeurism. Arrest him. This is the moment. This is what we in the malicious compliance community call the drop. I don't argue. I don't raise my voice. I simply reach down to the small patio table next to my chair and pick up the thick, glossy manila folder Mike left me. I walk over to the officers. Officers, if I may, I say, extending the folder to Miller. Miller takes it, opens it, and starts reading. The rookie leans over his shoulder. Inside that folder, I narrate loudly, ensuring Richard can hear every single syllable. You will find the Commercial Part 107 FAA pilot's license for the remote pilot currently monitoring this flight from his office. Behind that is the official FAA Federal Registration Certificate for this specific DJI Matrice 300 aircraft. Behind that is a printed schematic of the Zenmuse H20 payload camera, complete with the digitally locked gimbal pitch and yaw coordinates. Miller flips the pages, his eyes scanning the official government seals and technical readouts. What does the camera lock mean in English? Miller asks, looking up. It means, I smile, that the camera is digitally and physically restricted. It is pointing downward at a precise 45-degree angle. The only thing in its field of view is my concrete driveway, my front welcome mat, and my own front door. It cannot see the street. It cannot see Richard's house. It cannot see into any windows. Furthermore, it is recording on a closed-loop system for the sole purpose of private property protection. I take a breath, letting the silence hang for a second before delivering the killing blow. And finally, on the last page, you will find a printed copy of the Federal Aviation Administration's official memorandum regarding state and local regulations of unmanned aircraft systems, highlighting the doctrine of federal preemption. Miller flips to the last page. He reads it in silence. He reads the highlighted yellow paragraph that explicitly states local municipalities and HOAs cannot establish no-fly zones or regulate operations of federally registered aircraft in navigable airspace. Miller closes the folder. He hands it back to me. He turns to Richard. Richard is practically panting. He looks like he expects the officers to tackle me to the ground, slap cuffs on my wrists, and shoot the drone out of the sky with a 12-gauge shotgun. Instead, Officer Miller hooks his thumbs back into his belt and delivers the verdict. Sir, Miller says, his voice ringing with absolute, crushing finality. This is a federally registered aircraft operating in public airspace. He's not looking into your windows. He's looking at his own driveway. This is a civil issue, and honestly, it's out of our jurisdiction. Richard freezes. His brain short-circuits. Out of your jurisdiction? He is in my neighborhood. He is on his own property, the rookie chimes in, gaining some confidence. And the drone is in federal airspace. We literally can't touch it, man. Even if we wanted to, interfering with an aircraft in flight is a federal crime. We're city cops. But the noise! Richard stammers, pointing at the buzzing drone. It's a nuisance. I have a decibel meter in the cruiser, Miller says casually. I can go get it if you'd like. But I can tell you right now, from the sidewalk, that thing is pulling maybe 60-65 decibels. The city noise ordinance doesn't kick in until 85 decibels during daylight hours. A passing garbage truck is louder than that. He is well within his legal rights. So you're just going to let him do this? Richard whispers, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and sheer, impotent rage. You're going to let him destroy the Whispering Pines community? I'm going to let him protect his packages. Miller corrects him. If you want to fight him, you're going to have to take it up with the FAA. I hear their hold times are terrible this time of year. Have a good day, sir. Miller tips his hat to me, a tiny, undeniable smirk playing on his lips. Nice setup, by the way, very thorough. Have a safe shift, officers, I reply, grinning like an absolute maniac. The cops walk back to their cruisers. I watch them get in. Through the windshield, I can see Officer Miller say something to the rookie. The rookie throws his head back and starts laughing. They throw the SUVs into drive and slowly roll away, leaving Richard standing alone on the sidewalk, completely stripped of his authority, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. Richard doesn't look at me. He can't. He stares at the ground for a long, agonizing moment. Then, he turns and walks away. He doesn't power walk. His shoulders are slumped. The clipboard hangs limply at his side. He looks like a defeated general retreating from a battlefield he completely misunderstood. Above me, the Matrice 300 buzzes happily, a mechanical angel of malicious compliance watching over my driveway. If you think a retired orthodontist with a god complex just gives up after the police tell him he's wrong, you haven't dealt with many HOAs. By Tuesday evening, the neighborhood is in an absolute frenzy. The drone has been flying 24/7. It survives a light rainstorm on Sunday without missing a beat. It hums through the night, its red and green LEDs casting an eerie high-tech glow over my lawn. The porch pirates? Completely vanished. Not a single package has gone missing in a 3-block radius. The drone is so intimidating that delivery drivers are practically tiptoeing up to my door, gently placing the boxes down like they're defusing a bomb, and waving at the camera before sprinting back to their trucks. But Richard is brewing. On Monday morning, an aggressive all-caps email hits the inbox of every resident in Whispering Pines. Subject: Mandatory Emergency Board Meeting. Threat to Community Standards. The meeting is scheduled for Tuesday night at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. Attendance is strongly encouraged. When I walk into the clubhouse at 6:55 p.m., the place is packed. It smells like stale coffee and tension. The folding chairs are arranged in rows facing a long folding table at the front. Richard is sitting in the center chair, flanked by Margaret and the rest of the board members, who all look incredibly uncomfortable. I take a seat in the back row. Greg the anarchist is sitting next to me. He gives me a subtle fist bump. At exactly 7 p.m., Richard slams a wooden gavel onto the table. This emergency meeting of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association is now called to order, Richard announces, glaring directly at me. We are bypassing the standard agenda to address a critical, immediate threat to the safety, privacy, and architectural harmony of our community. Richard stands up. He has a PowerPoint presentation. Of course he does. He clicks a button, and a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my drone hovering over my driveway appears on the projector screen. As many of you are aware, Richard begins, his voice dripping with venom. One of our residents has decided to flagrantly violate the spirit of our community by deploying a massive industrial, noise-polluting surveillance aircraft over his property. This device operates 24 hours a day. It is an eyesore. It is a menace. A low murmur ripples through the crowd. When confronted with his violation of Bylaw 4B, Section 2, Richard continues, the resident used a legal loophole regarding affixed devices to avoid compliance. Therefore, the board has drafted an emergency, retroactive addendum to the bylaws. We are putting it to an immediate vote. He clicks the slide. The text of the new rule appears. Emergency Addendum 4B, Section 3. The operation, hovering, or tethering of any unmanned aircraft system, UAS drone, or flying surveillance device within the airspace, immediately above any lot in the Whispering Pines community, is strictly prohibited. Violations will result in an immediate $1,000 daily fine. Richard looks terribly smug. He thinks he's checkmated me. He thinks he can just write a new rule to rewrite federal law. I stand up. Point of order, Richard, I say, my voice ringing clearly across the quiet room. You do not have the floor, Richard snaps. Actually, according to Robert's Rules of Order, which this HOA charter strictly adheres to according to Section 1, Article 4, any resident in good standing may address the board regarding proposed bylaw amendments prior to a vote. I recite flawlessly. I spent Sunday night memorizing the charter just for this moment. The HOA lawyer, a tired-looking guy sitting at the end of the table, sighs and nods at Richard. Richard clenches his jaw. Speak. I walk down the center aisle, turning to face the crowd of my neighbors, then turning to look directly at the board. This proposed rule, I begin, keeping my tone perfectly conversational, is beautifully written. It's concise, it's clear, and it is completely 100% illegal. That is an outrageous claim, Richard sputters. It's a federal fact. Richard, I reply, pulling out a printed stack of the same FAA documents I gave the police. The Federal Aviation Administration, a branch of the United States government, has exclusive sovereignty over the airspace of the United States. They, and only they, regulate where aircraft can and cannot fly. A drone is a federally classified aircraft. An HOA cannot ban drones any more than an HOA can ban helicopters from flying over our roofs. I turn back to the crowd. Think about the precedent this sets. If Richard can pass a rule claiming ownership of the sky above our houses, what's next? Is he going to ban Delta Airlines Flight 482 from flying its approach over Boise because the engine noise disrupts his morning walk? Is he going to fine the police department if their chopper searches for a suspect over our neighborhood? Of course not, because that would be absurd. I look back at the board. If you vote to pass this addendum, you are not protecting the community. You are opening this homeowners association up to a massive, crippling federal lawsuit. You will be actively attempting to enforce local regulations on federally preempted airspace. The FAA does not take kindly to rogue neighborhood boards trying to play air traffic controller. If you pass this, I will not only ignore the fines, but I will report the board to the FAA regional office for attempting to unlawfully regulate the national airspace system. The room is dead silent. The HOA lawyer is furiously typing on his laptop, looking incredibly stressed. Furthermore, I add, dropping my voice to a dangerous, snarky hum, I only hired this drone because Richard fined me $500 for putting a 2-inch piece of plastic next to my door to stop thieves from stealing our packages. A camera that, by the way, you couldn't even see from the street. If the board drops the ridiculous fine and grants me an ARC exemption for the original doorbell camera, the drone goes away tomorrow. The crowd erupts. Let him keep the doorbell. Greg yells from the back. Someone stole my headphones. Drop the fine, Richard, Carol chimes in. The drone is scary, but at least nobody stole my mail today. Richard is slamming his gavel repeatedly, trying to regain control. Order! Order! The board will not be blackmailed. The amendment stands. All in favor? Only Richard and Margaret raise their hands. The other 3 board members keep their hands firmly in their laps, glaring at Richard. The HOA lawyer leans over and whispers aggressively in Richard's ear. I can't hear what he's saying, but I can read his lips. You cannot do this. The motion fails, Richard chokes out, his face pale. He slams the gavel down one last time. Meeting adjourned. I walk out of the clubhouse feeling like a conquering emperor. The legal blockade held. But Richard's ego is completely shattered. And when a petty man's ego is shattered, he stops using his brain and starts acting on raw, desperate emotion. Which brings us to Wednesday night. Or, more accurately, Thursday morning at 2:14 a.m. I am fast asleep in my master bedroom. The house is quiet, save for the faint, steady whir of the Matrice 300 tethered outside. Suddenly, my phone on the nightstand buzzes violently. It's not a text message. It's the high-priority, blaring alarm from my indoor security system. Now, remember how the HOA bylaw only banned cameras affixed to the exterior? While I was setting up the drone on Saturday, I also took the liberty of setting up 3 standard, battery-operated Wise cameras sitting on the windowsills inside my house, pointing out through the glass into the front yard. Perfectly legal, completely compliant. I grab my phone, the screen blinding me in the dark bedroom. I open the app. The notification reads, Motion detected. Front yard window, 2:14 a.m. I tap the live feed. The camera is equipped with military-grade infrared night vision. The lawn is illuminated in a bright, glowing green. And there, creeping across my perfectly manicured Kentucky bluegrass, is Richard. He is dressed entirely in black. Black sweatpants, a black hoodie pulled up over his head. And I am not making this up. Black streaks of what looks like shoe polish smeared under his eyes like Rambo. He looks like a geriatric ninja. And in his hands, he is holding a 12-foot aluminum pool skimmer. I sit bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I can't believe what I am watching. He has completely lost his mind. The emergency meeting broke him. He has resorted to suburban terrorism. I watch the feed in real time. Richard creeps closer to the driveway. He looks up at the drone, which is hovering steadily at 30 feet, its LEDs flashing rhythmically. Richard slowly extends the pool skimmer. He is aiming for the tether, the Kevlar line that supplies power to the drone. He thinks if he hooks the line and yanks it, he can bring the drone crashing down to the concrete. What Richard doesn't know is that the Volarius V-line tether system is incredibly smart. It has an auto-tensioner. He reaches out. He hooks the aluminum net of the pool skimmer around the Kevlar cable. He plants his feet, gritting his teeth, and gives a massive, violent yank backward. The cable doesn't snap. It doesn't even budge. Instead, the drone's onboard computer immediately detects the rapid, unauthorized tension on the line. The safety protocols engage in less than a millisecond. To prevent the aircraft from being pulled out of the sky, the ground station in my garage instantly triggers an emergency automated reel-in. The heavy-duty winch inside the ground station fires up with a loud clunk. It starts violently reeling the Kevlar cable in at a speed of 10 feet per second. Richard, still desperately gripping the pool skimmer hooked around the wire, is violently jerked forward. On the 1080p infrared feed, I watch the president of my HOA get launched off his feet like he just stepped on a cartoon rake. He flies forward, his black sneakers leaving the grass, and faceplants spectacularly onto the hard concrete of my driveway. The pool skimmer clatters away into the darkness. The drone, reacting to the reel-in, descends rapidly, the rotors screaming as it attempts to stabilize while being pulled. It drops to about 15 feet before the tension slacks, and it just hovers there, aggressively chopping the air directly above a groaning, sprawling Richard. I hit the record button on my app, saving every single frame of the footage to my local hard drive and the cloud. Richard scrambles to his feet, clutching his nose. He looks up at the drone, completely terrified, realizing he just lost a physical altercation with a robot. He turns and sprints off my property, disappearing into the suburban darkness. I sit in the dark, bathed in the glow of my phone screen. I am breathless. I am shaking, but not with rage this time. I am shaking with pure, unrestrained laughter. The trap didn't just snap. It caught the rat perfectly. Richard just committed trespassing. But far, far worse than that. I open a new browser tab on my phone. I look up a specific piece of federal law I had saved in my bookmarks for exactly this kind of worst-case scenario. Title 18 U.S. Code 32, Destruction of Aircraft or Aircraft Facilities. Whoever willfully sets fire to, damages, destroys, disables, or wrecks any aircraft in the special aircraft jurisdiction of the United States, or any civil aircraft used, operated, or employed in interstate, overseas, or foreign air commerce, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. A drone is an aircraft. Richard willfully attempted to disable and wreck a federally registered aircraft operating in navigable airspace. He didn't just break an HOA rule. He committed a federal felony. It was 2:30 a.m. I had the footage, I had the law, I had everything I needed to end this war forever. I set my phone down on the nightstand, closed my eyes, and went to sleep to the soothing lullaby of 4 carbon fiber rotors humming in the night. The next morning, I don't go outside. I don't confront Richard. I don't even look out the window. When you have a nuke, you don't drop it yourself. You have a professional do it. I boot up my computer, pull the video files from the cloud, package them into a secure, encrypted folder alongside the $500 HOA citation, the $2,500 invoice from Sky High Solutions, and Mike's drone registration paperwork. At 9 a.m., I call my lawyer. His name is Dave. Dave specializes in property law, and he possesses a distinct, aggressive legal ruthlessness that I deeply admire. I explain the situation. I send him the files. I can hear Dave softly weeping with joy over the phone as he watches the infrared footage of Richard, face-planting on my driveway. "This is beautiful," Dave whispers into the receiver. "It's perfect. He actually tried to hook it with a pool skimmer. He tried to bring down an aircraft with pool maintenance equipment." "Yes, Dave. Can we draft the letter?" "Draft it? I'm going to frame it," Dave says. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, a courier arrives at Richard's house. The courier requires a direct signature. Richard, likely icing a severely bruised ego and a scraped chin, signs for it. Inside the envelope is a heavy, cream-colored piece of legal stationery. It is a formal cease and desist and demand for settlement. Here is a summary of the absolute poetry Dave wrote. "Dear Mr. President, this firm represents James McLean regarding the ongoing harassment and unlawful regulatory overreach by the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, Board of Directors." Attached to this letter is a USB flash drive containing time-stamped, high-definition infrared footage captured on Thursday, May 21, 2026, at 2:14 a.m. The footage clearly depicts you, Richard Winston, unlawfully trespassing upon our client's private property. Furthermore, the footage documents your willful, premeditated attempt to physically entangle, disable, and destroy a DJI Matrice 300 RTK commercial aircraft. As you were previously informed by local law enforcement, this drone is a federally registered aircraft operating in the National Airspace System. Under 18 U.S.C. 32, the willful destruction or attempted disablement of a civil aircraft is a federal felony. punishable by severe fines and up to 20 years in federal prison. Additionally, your actions constitute civil trespass, malicious destruction of property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Our client is well within his rights to immediately forward this footage to the Federal Aviation Administration's Law Enforcement Division, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Boise Police Department to press criminal charges. However, our client is willing to settle this matter entirely, quietly, and without federal law enforcement involvement, provided the following non-negotiable conditions are met within 24 hours. The ultimatum was a work of art. I didn't ask for the moon. I just asked for total, unconditional surrender. Condition 1, the immediate, written dismissal of the $500 fine and the architectural violation notice regarding the original doorbell camera. Condition 2, the HOA board will issue a formal, written, architectural review committee variance, granting permanent, irrevocable approval for my specific doorbell camera to be affixed to the exterior trim. Condition 3, Richard will personally reimburse my client for the $2,500 commercial drone deployment invoice as his unlawful harassment necessitated the expenditure. Condition 4, Richard will immediately, publicly resign from his position as president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association Board of Directors, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. The letter concluded with a simple sentence. If these terms are not accepted and executed by 5 p.m. tomorrow, the footage will be transferred to federal authorities. We await your response. I spent the rest of Thursday relaxing. I edited a video. I drank some espresso. I listened to the sweet aggressive hum of the drone outside. I didn't have to wait until 5 p.m. on Friday. At exactly 9:15 a.m. on Friday morning, my phone chimed. It was an email notification from the Whispering Pines HOA automated system. It was sent to every resident in the neighborhood. Subject: Board leadership transition. Dear neighbors, effective immediately. I am resigning from my position as president of the board of directors for personal and health reasons. I am no longer able to dedicate the required time to the community. Vice President Margaret will assume interim duties. Thank you for your support over the years. Richard, I smiled. But I wasn't done waiting. 10 minutes later, my lawyer called. Check your email, kid, Dave said, sounding incredibly smug. I opened my inbox. There was an email from the HOA's legal counsel. Attached were 2 PDFs. The first was a formal notice of dismissal for citation 492, the $500 fine, wiped clean, erased. The second was an official ARC variance form, signed by Margaret, granting me permanent permission to maintain a video doorbell affixed to the exterior structure of my property. And at the bottom of the email was a receipt for a wire transfer of $2,500 sent directly from Richard's personal bank account to Dave's escrow account. Checkmate. Complete, utter, devastating victory. The plastic king of Boise had been dethroned. The ridiculous fine was vaporized. The contractor was paid. And my house was officially granted diplomatic immunity from the aesthetic police. I walked out into my garage. The massive Volarius ground station was humming away. The Kevlar tether stretched taut into the morning sky. I reached out and flipped the heavy red power switch to the off position. The hum died instantly. Outside, the angry swarm of robotic bees began to quiet down. I walked out to the driveway just in time to watch the Matrice 300 gently, autonomously descend as the tether reeled it in. It touched down on the concrete with a soft clack. The rotors spun down, slowing to a stop. The silence that rushed into the neighborhood was deafening. It was the sweetest, most peaceful silence I had ever heard. The air felt clear. The sky was just a sky again. I pulled out my phone and texted Mike. The war is won. The king has abdicated. You can come pick up the bird. Mike replied almost instantly. On my way. I'm framing that $2,500 check. I walked back up my driveway, stepped onto my front porch, and reached into my pocket. I pulled out the little black rectangle, the $100 Wi-Fi doorbell camera. I grabbed my drill, lined up the bracket on the wood trim, and drove the screws deep into the frame. I clicked the camera into place. The little blue ring lit up. It chirped at me softly. It was tiny. It was quiet. It was perfectly legally affixed to my exterior structure. And as I stood back to admire my handiwork, I looked down the street. I could see Richard's house in the distance. The blinds were drawn tight. The driveway was empty. The neighborhood was safe. So, what is the moral of the story here on sovereign ruling? It's simple. Bureaucrats, petty tyrants, and HOA presidents rely on the assumption that you don't know the rules better than they do. They rely on intimidation. They rely on the exhaustion of fighting them. But there is always a bigger fish. There is always a higher law. And when someone tries to trap you in their ridiculous ground-level power trip, you don't fight them in the mud. Sometimes, to protect your front porch, you don't need to fight the HOA on the ground. You just need to take them to the skies. Use their words against them. Find the federal preemption and never, ever be afraid to deploy an industrial aircraft to prove a point. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment if you've ever dealt with a Richard in your life. And remember, stay legally petty, my friends.